Hey guys, Nick here. Welcome to the Omniverse of Nick's next Walking Dead Friday the 13th and crossover story. What if Negan used Jason Voorhees, which will be 3 parts. Before we get started, be sure to smash the like button and subscribe to the Omniverse of Nick and check out the About tab and home pages so you don't miss anything that the Omniverse has to offer for the future. With all that said, let's begin. So, this is the next Walking Dead story. What if Negan used Jason Voorhees? Highly anticipated, and 3 parts, and trust me, suspense, surprise, and everything. You guys are gonna like this. So, for the two of you who don't know, Negan is one of the most infamous villains and people turned good and just iconic characters The Walking Dead has to offer. And Jason Voorhees is one of the most infamous horror movie villains of all time. And about 3 years ago, start of my channel, I did a story or tale of him being in The Walking Dead. But I said that there's no way to put him in a story because of who he is and just what he's about. But that was 3 years ago, and I'm going to get to that more in a minute. We also got to see a Walker version of him, just like the Freddy Krueger Walker, in the Daryl Dixon spinoff. So it just goes to show nothing goes unmissed whenever you got a huge show like The Walking Dead. But I just forbode myself from doing Jason Voorhees, Freddy Krueger, and Michael Myers in a story because there's no way to put them in a cohesive story for The Walking Dead because basically all 3 of them are immortal. But there have been times where they can die. And especially if you put them in the earlier segments of their movies or in specific moments of said movies. But even then, their immortality is very, very, very complex and put in. So, like I said, that was 3 years ago. So now we not only got this for Jason, but 3 others lined up. Freddy Krueger, pretty much never going to happen. Michael Myers is pretty much on that line too. Jason Voorhees is the only one who really can work in The Walking Dead. And for this story and the others preceding it, you'll see what I mean. So, just want to point out, no saviors. Jason Voorhees, besides one savior, besides Negan, will replace all the rest. No saviors. And Negan will be using an electric collar to control him, just like Broly, pretty much, or just any beast or uncontrollable person that you've seen, like Shimo Godzilla, or just in general, beasts in general. You guys get what I mean. So, he will also affect really, really much so by season 6 the confrontation with Rick's group. And you guys are going to see in these 3 parts, this story is extremely suspenseful and surprising. And the ending will surprise you in a way that really you wouldn't have been expecting. And it will be a callback to a few other stories. But it will be worth the watch and the anticipation. So let's begin. We open up with Negan starting out as the leader savior, going across the bikers, getting Laura, who's the only savior, and going on the journey to hunt for an army for his whole savior introduction. But just then, he is in a part of the woods where a menacing figure has exited Camp Crystal Lake, crossed miles and miles and miles after this whole world turned into undead, and it ruined what he was basically still alive for. And so now, Jason's hunting. And soon enough, Negan crosses right into the middle of where the two are destined and fated to meet. And they do. In the middle of the woods, Negan meets Jason Voorhees. And within a second, Jason strikes with his machete. Negan just barely dodges it, with the tip of the machete just piercing his hair and a part of his head. But Negan strikes Jason over and over and over so much that his bat breaks. Think about it for a second. Negan strikes Jason so much. Jason is so durable that he keeps getting back up, and he keeps getting back up. And Negan's trying over and over and over again, but Jason just keeps getting up, and it's not stopping. And what adds to that is that every time he strikes, the bat begins to weaken more and more and more. It's like the barbed wire and just the hardwood of the bat aren't doing anything to him. There's marks, there's obvious signs that he is hurting him, but it doesn't seem to be affecting him. Jason just keeps on shrugging through the pain. And soon enough, it becomes so obvious how durable and non-injured Jason is that the bat can't take it anymore, and it breaks. Negan looks at Lucille, his new weapon to remember his wife, just forging this weapon that was given to him by Laura, and it's destroyed. Jason then strikes with his machete. Slash! And then a white flash. We cut to Negan hold over a banister at a huge, huge fortified location. The sanctuary. But he's not dead. Doesn't seem to be any sign of Jason. And to add to that, what just happened wasn't real. What actually happened was, instead of the back, Negan struck for the face, distracting Jason and knocking him out enough. Negan was able to drag him to the nearest location. And with Laura by his side, who questions everything that Negan's doing right now, says, I thought we were after an army, not some kind of half-man, half-walker that wouldn't even shrug beyond some of your attacks. Even if I had gotten in there, I doubt that my help would have stopped whatever this thing is. Negan says he's got an idea of who this is, but he can't place his finger on it. But that doesn't matter right now. They could use this guy, this beast, this person to their advantage. All he's got to do is run a test. The savior idea is still in his head, but he wants to experiment with this guy. So, Negan holding Lucille says, and this place is the perfect place to commence the first test. And they find a workroom with a bunch of tech, a bunch of tools, and very much so out of the way of anyone in the satellite outpost to stop them. And Negan latches on an electric collar with the help of Laura and the tools at their disposal to control Jason. Once Jason spurs and wakes up, he instantly jumps at Negan, who runs out of there lightning fast. Jason running right after him, with Laura hiding. And with Negan hiding enough to get away from Jason, Jason doesn't stop. Paula and all of the saviors in that satellite outpost instantly get killed. All their gunshots and weapons mean nothing. Jason eviscerates all of them. Laura finds the perfect opportunity and trips Jason. Then she pushes a button and boop, the electric collar spurs and electrocutes Jason, which we've seen him get electrocuted and affected by fire, explosions, etc., etc. So electrocution by the collar, immortal or not, would be enough to knock him out and get him hurt. Negan doesn't want to take chances, and boom, strikes him in the face with Lucille, knocking him out for sure. Negan and Laura discuss what has happened, and the fact that no man or woman in this satellite outpost could stop this beast. They even aimed at his head, and it still didn't affect him. So this guy, this person, this monster is clearly not a walker. If he was a walker, he would have died. Because you have to hit the brain. And these guys, these people, they hit his brain multiple times with weapons, with guns, etc. Negan has even done it a bunch of times. And nothing has happened. So clearly, this guy is not a man. And he's not a walker. He's some kind of some kind of hybrid being. And Negan, he is definitely looking into experimenting with this more. And he smiles sinisterly at Laura and says, they might not need an army. And he's beginning to wonder and begin to connect the dots about who this creature really is. But he's not done testing it. They find another satellite outpost, and Negan commences the same test, and everybody is killed there. Then they approach a huge fortified location, the Sanctuary, and Negan says he knows that there is going to be a great amount of people here, and this is where he will commence the final test. So they push the button on Jason's collar, waking him up, and then in the same area which Negan and Gabriel were in, Negan and Laura go to. Thankfully, there's nobody there, but they're not going to get in the way of Jason whenever he attacks this time, because unlike the satellite outposts, there are too many guys there and people that if they get in the way of Jason or go into the wrong area, they could die. And Negan does not want that to happen, most of all because he's trying to figure out an experiment with this plan of his. So Jason enters the Sanctuary alone, and everybody is killed. Simon, supposedly the savior leader before Negan, with no evidence to suggest otherwise, is killed. Gavin, Regina, and every savior under the old savior leader's command is killed by Jason's onslaught. None of their attacks, be it gun, melee weapon, or combined assault, mean anything to Jason. And soon enough, Negan and Laura enter the Sanctuary, with Jason spotting them and going and rushing at them full force. Negan clashes with Jason, Lucille versus Machete, over and over again, but Jason's pure willpower and strength and menacing ferocity is way too much for Negan. No matter how angry or powerful Negan is, it's no match for Jason. So, Laura does the only thing she can, electrocutes Jason, and Jason once again meets the bat. So Negan is here we flash, this is where we flash to, where Negan was holstered over the banister of the Sanctuary. This is where it all comes together, but it's not the last flash that you will see, just because this is where it's supposedly settling in. Negan talks to Laura now and says this is proven that even an army cannot stand to this man, and he finally tells Laura that he knows who he is, and he knows what their army and their plan will be for what will be the Sanctuary and Negan's savior plan. They don't need an army. They just need the two of them. Jason Voorhees is who this person is, and he will be their army, and he knows just the name. Jason Voorhees, the looming savior. And with this, Negan and Laura have commenced an ultimate plan beyond anything that any canon counterpart of them has ever done. A lone person, Jason Voorhees, will be their army, with Negan and Laura at the helm controlling him, just like Broly and every other ferocious monster that is beyond control, and still might be. How long will they be able to control Jason, or will he eventually be tamed to them? How will Rick's group even compare to Jason or Negan's group in this timeline? Will it be 10 times easier, or will this be 10 times worse, no matter if there's no savior army to encounter at any base or anything? How will the communities fare with no amount of soldiers? Will Jason replace that in a much more menacing way? And how many more flashes or changes, or how will the direction of the story go with Jason Voorhees as the looming savior and a new turning point for the Walking Dead universe, and a full-fledged sitting point for how Jason Voorhees would canonically, and is now canonically, put into the Walking Dead franchise? Find out in the penultimate and second part next time. Hey guys, Nick here. Welcome to the Omniverse of Nick's next Walking Dead Jason Voorhees and crossover story. What if Negan used Jason Voorhees, the penultimate part? Before we get started, be sure to smash the like button and subscribe to the Omniverse of Nick, and check out the About tab and homepage so you don't miss anything that the Omniverse has to offer. With all that said, let's begin. So we open up where we ended off last time, with Negan remembering who Jason Voorhees is. Wild, if you really think about it. And calling him the looming savior. Seeing him take out the sanctuary and all those other posts before he even made himself a leader of them has proven to him no army can withstand Jason Voorhees, which is why he is the perfect tool for his plan. So, Laura says, "Are you really sure about that?" And she says, "This might have worked so far and it seems like a good plan, but don't forget, he could kill us at any given point. What if the collar doesn't work anymore? You can't just keep knocking him out over and over again. That'll only work for so long. You saw what happens to him. He doesn't register pain." And Negan says, "We'll cross that bridge when we come to it, Laura. That's why I have something extra planned as a security measure. Don't worry." And he says, "Now is the time for a true savior mission." And they're the only two that can do it. And with Jason by their side, no one will take anything from them, and they will take everything away from everyone. First, Oceanside. Negan talks to the leaders in typical Negan fashion, killing at least one or two of them to prove a point, and says, "Well, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. You give us half your stuff, we'll let you go. And this community can live, prosper, and manage. But you're going to have to give us at least half of all of your stuff in this community. And when the community resists and fails to oblige, they all vacate, run, and are slaughtered." As Jason, seeing this familiar landscape, Oceanside, reminds him that he once had a mission. He once had a place. And he once hunted. And now, besides those other places he was just at with this guy, Negan, who he holds no kind of allegiance to, but seeing as though he's no other choice but to stroll along with him and this girl Laura, it's time that he took on this familiar landscape looking like his old home, Camp Crystal Lake, and he slaughters everybody. And luckily, even though the people try to survive from Oceanside, we're not getting that whole thing. We're not getting survivors. But in the end of it all, when Oceanside is slaughtered, Negan then uses the remote and electrocutes Jason. And this proves to Negan, Oceanside was the first of probably many communities and people, just like, for example, the Sanctuary and those satellite outposts, that the New World Order either rules with Negan or dies with the old Negan. Soon enough, he comes upon the garbage people, Jadis and her group, the scavengers, but they resist too. Jason hunts and goes in through all of the dump and kills them all. And yes, even Jadis. Next, the kingdom. And yeah, you can see where that's going to. They resist. And Shiva immediately jumps at Jason, but Jason just has his machete and strikes it straight through Shiva's mouth. So this would be a brutal kill. Think about how awesome it would be for a tiger to fight Jason, and then remember, Jason can't feel pain, but Shiva, oh boy, Jason would not hold back an inch. Jerry and so many others would sacrifice themselves to save Ezekiel, and then Ezekiel would be left all alone, that all his kingdom has died, and now he's about to meet the same fate. And Negan says there was a way out of this. All you had to do was submit. And Ezekiel's killed. Then they get to Hilltop. But this time, not really any resistance. Jesus and Gregory talk about this because Jason's not brought into each community or each person until Negan knows they're not going to listen. So, since Jesus and Gregory are actually beginning to listen, Jason isn't brought out yet. And Jesus and Gregory talk like they're just two people. What's giving them half our stuff gonna hurt, especially if they have a huge home? They need it. So Jesus agrees, but he is kind of suspicious at the whole idea of how they're acting and 50% of the stuff. It's confusing. And Gregory has no choice but to oblige. Even Gregory has sort of a heart, even though he is a horrible character. So when they get back to the sanctuary, every community, to Negan's mind at least, has been checked for. Nothing new has come to pass. And Negan's extra plan is to chain Jason to the walkers that he holds at the gates. Because remember, Negan will still put that idea into place whenever he gates the walkers and everything to those posts. And Jason, he would not just be put on the gate. He would be chained legs, chest, neck, arms, everywhere. And if somehow, some way, he was able to break off, the electric collar would be hit. So Jason can't move. And he's just by a bunch of walkers who even this very dead zombie-like minded Jason can see these creatures are a lot like him, and yet nothing like him. And Negan says to Laura, told you there was a plan. And now with so many communities' belongings, nobody can stop us. But that's where he'd be wrong. Soon enough, Rick's group comes into the picture after just going out of the barn or coming near the barn, and the whole Tyrese's death and so on. The whole story with Rick's group has gone completely the same. And then they enter Alexandria, and here's where the deviations begin on their side, because we've already had a huge amount of deviations with the main story. But now we're going to get that touched and how it affects Rick's group. Aaron says to Rick, there's been rumors going around of a man with a bat with barbed wire and a blonde-haired girl by his side, apparently with some guy called the Looming Savior. It's like a big walker-like man with a mask and a machete and a bunch of other tools. But Aaron just thinks it could be rumors. There's no way half a walker, half man exists. But he just feels that Rick and everybody should know. Rick and Deanna talk about this, and even Deanna has heard the rumors. And they say that if this presents a threat to their community, she trusts that Rick and everybody will know what to do when that time comes. But for now, they gotta listen to what goes on in this community. And basically the whole rest of the story plays up the same until season 6, whenever we get to a pivotal moment. They're not going to encounter the saviors on the road because they all died at the sanctuary. We're also not going to get a whole Dwight and Sherry and Tina join the saviors, blah, 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 blah. Instead, Dwight and Sherry are not going to rob Daryl or turn against him. Instead, they are going to come with, which isn't the first time I've done that. They have joined the group before, so that's going to happen here. And with that, Abraham, Sasha, Daryl, and Dwight and Sherry all make it back, and they're going to make it back much sooner because of no saviors in the road. So right whenever the group is out and trying to do the whole gut plan and everything, right whenever Sam starts to cry out and he gets bit and gets killed, right before Jesse dies and Carl will get shot and Ron can pull off the shot, Michonne stabs him, etc. Right as Sam dies, Abraham, Sasha, Daryl, Dwight, and Sherry all come to the rescue. And Daryl uses the rocket launcher and provides the group a kind of more enhanced group, a much more stable head as we get into killing all the walkers in the community. Then we cut to Rick and Daryl meeting Jesus, and Jesus, whenever he talks to everybody at Alexandria, even he knows about the rumors, and they're not rumors. He did, in fact, their community, the Hilltop, did encounter that man with the barbed wire bat and the blonde-haired girl, but there wasn't a half man, half walker, masked machete guy. It was just the two of them. So it could just be rumors, but he did meet the two of them. When they get to the Hilltop, we're not going to get an Ethan stabs Gregory and a whole scene there, because why would there need to be? And the deal with Maggie and Gregory, I feel, would actually go a lot better with no saviors to threaten them. We're not going to get Carol leaving the group because she's not going to be traumatized at the whole killing the saviors at the satellite outpost, because there's no reason for them to go to the outpost, you know? Yeah. Then we get to Abraham and Eugene. They still have their beef at the ammo shop thing. And we get Daryl, Rosita, and Denise. They all go on their trip. But Denise is not going to die because Dwight is with them. And there's no saviors. So, yeah. We're also not going to get Carol and Morgan at the Kingdom because Carol doesn't leave, meaning Morgan's not going to leave. So they're not going to the Kingdom. And the Kingdom's gone anyway. So, yeah. Then Maggie's pregnancy begins to advance. And so does Jesse's. That's right. By the way, just want to point out a few things before we move on. Ron still does come off with the gunshot, and he still gets killed, but Carl does not get shot in the eye. Owen, God knows what's happened to him. Sam still does die, and Jesse does not. So Jesse lives, Ron still dies, Carl keeps both eyes, and Sam still dies. And Owen, who knows? Rick and Michonne are not going to get together. Instead, it's going to be Rick and Jesse. Hinting to the Omniverse story? Not really, but this is not the first time I've made Rick and Jesse get together, and it won't be the last. And that's how the whole Omniverse idea came into play with Thunder. So, irony. Anyways, they all get in the RV to go to Hilltop so that they can get Maggie and Jesse's pregnancy taken care of. But will they get there the same way with no saviors in the road to stop them? Will it be easier? When will they actually come face to face with Negan and Laura and Jason Voorhees? And since the finale's next time, is this going to be a dark ending? Or is it going to be a almost too good to be true ending? Find out. Hey guys, welcome to the Omniverse of Nick. What if Negan used Jason Voorhees, the finale? Make sure, before we begin, to smash the like button and subscribe to the Omniverse of Nick, and check out the About tab and homepage so you don't miss anything that the Omniverse has to offer for the future, and in general. With all that said, let's begin. We open up where we ended off last time. The RV with everybody in it, definitely a more enhanced group in this timeline, go to the Hilltop to help Jesse and Maggie with their pregnancies, but it's not the saviors and the beat-up Hilltop member that they meet in the road this time. They see two figures, a man with a barbed wire bat and a blonde-haired girl, Laura, with Negan, and a huge U-Haul truck behind them, face as the RV begins to approach them. Rick and everybody step out of the RV and say, it's not smart to stay in the middle of the road. Are you from somewhere? Or are you going to start something with us? We're in a hurry. And Negan and Laura just sinisterly smile and say, oh no, we're not going to start something. That is if you don't first. Give us half of your stuff that you possess at the moment and where you're coming from. And then we'll be on our way. Rick says, nah, that deal's not going to work for them. And he says, the fact is, if they were from somewhere, they'd be asking for half of their stuff. But only they're thinking they don't have to go about this a violent way. That's if these two, by themselves compared to the bunch of people they have, aren't looking to try to start something with them. They'd be no match. Laura just points her gun straight at Rick, showing that they're not backing down, no matter how outnumbered they are. And Negan just walks with Lucille towards everybody, with everybody having guns now trained on them, and says, well, I did say that we could have done this the easy way, but I guess you've chosen the hard way. And Negan points a gun, and when it still shows that nobody's given an inch, Negan just turns away with his head down, exasperated. And he says, with another sinister smile, and Lucille back over his shoulder, says, well, I guess we're doing this the hard way. And him and Laura open up the huge back of this abandoned, rundown U-Haul, and a bunch of walkers storm out of it. Rick and everybody pull out their guns, and it's an effortless kill. It's basically like the farm, if you really think about it. And Rick says, is that all you've got? If so, get out of our way. We're not asking you again. But Negan just smiles and says, did you really think that we would come all this way, hoping to find another community or people, and walkers is the best we have to offer? Please. And Negan, holding Lucille out in front of him and them, says, you haven't even begun to see what Negan and the Saviors are capable of. And in the very, very back of the U-Haul, who was behind the walkers, lays Jason Voorhees, chained from leg to chest to neck to arms. And they can see inside the U-Haul, just barely, because the darkness is covering him. But Rick's beginning to think the rumors, I think, are true, guys. And Laura goes in and unlocks the chains for Jason. Then she just runs out of there as fast as she can. Jason picks up a spear and begins to exit the vehicle. Rick says, no, the rumors are true. Everybody, guns aimed, fire at will. And Jason throws the spear straight through Abraham's eye. So basically he gets his comic death, except it's not an arrow that goes through his eye. It's a whole freaking spear. So yeah, he's kind of dead. Rick just says, no! And everybody just shoots mercilessly at Jason. Everybody. Daryl, Morgan, Rick, Maggie, Glenn, Carl, Sasha, Rosita, Rick with his python and a bunch of different weapons. Everybody is just shooting mercilessly, not giving an inch or caring how much ammo they're spending. Jason is getting hit, and it is affecting him, but he just walks through the bullets. At some point, it stops seeming to have effect, and he's just walking through menacingly. And this actually begins to scare Rick and everybody else. Negan is just sitting there with Laura grinning. But Rick says, don't let up! Keep firing! And Daryl pulls out the rocket launcher, and it does fling Jason back, and it does explode him. But he just walks through the fire, ash, and destruction, and he's on fire. This isn't the first time we've seen something like this. And Rick is beginning to get even more scared and furious, and he just yells to everybody, "Keep firing!" And Daryl pulls out his crossbow, and everybody is just raining down every bullet and exhaust of ammunition they have. But Jason's still on fire and seemingly injured, just still cruising through this onslaught. And Negan says, "Enough playing games. Destroy them!" Jason, seemingly listening to Negan for the very first time, steps straight towards the group and begins the onslaught. Carl is the first to die. Rosita tries to fight back, but she is the next one. Then Sasha, then Jessie, and her unborn baby. Maggie and her unborn baby. Glenn, Dwight, Sherry. Eugene sees that Abraham is clinging to life, so he barely escapes death to try to help him, but Abraham loses any sort of fight that he has as he sacrifices whatever life he has in him to protect Eugene. Aaron's the next one. Daryl puts up one of the most fights against Jason, but he's still no match. Michonne is next, trying to use every part of her strength with her sword and everything, but it's just met with utter resistance and ferocity from Jason. Rick, Eugene, and just a few others are the only ones left to stand up to Jason. And Jason's just about to strike at them and finish the job whenever a bunch of unexpected saviors, not Negan, but actual saviors, show up. Owen is shown to be alive with one arm gone and coming in for the save. Morales, who didn't join Negan in this timeline, is side by side with Owen. The Croat, who didn't join Negan, is side by side with them and Sadiq getting rescued early. All four of them with melee weapons and guns, along with Rick, Eugene, and the few others that are alive, now pull out all the stops and are holding nothing back. And with all of their friends and family dead, they have nothing left to lose. But Jason just fights ferociously and menacingly through this entire onslaught. And with machete, saw, arrow gun, and spear, and everything that you could think that Jason could use, especially handpicked from Negan, Owen, Morgan, Carol, Morales tries to fight, but he is killed too. The Croat, Sadiq, and at the end of it all, Rick is just sitting there, all by himself, just seeing that he's the only one left, with Eugene taking the fall for him. And he just yells out, "If you're going to kill me, just get it over with. I have nothing anymore." But Negan says, "Jason, stop. That's enough." And Negan says for Jason to stand down. Negan will be the one to end Rick himself. But Jason, he stirs, just holds down his machete in hand, and then he stares right at Negan and begins to step towards him. Slowly, but very, very menacingly. But Negan now sees that Jason wasn't listening to him. He was doing all of that of his own accord, just like he always has. So there's only one thing to do now, and he tells Laura to press the button and electrocute Jason. But Laura says she's trying, but she can't, because it turns out all those explosions, all those melee weapons, all those bullets, all those attacks, all that fire caused Jason's electric collar to break off. And it's completely destroyed by the ash, rubble, and destruction of this entire battle. Negan, seeing the collar on the ground in shards and in ruin, now knows what's about to happen to him. Jason rips Lucille out of Negan's hands, and Negan now knows he's about to die. Jason, with Lucille and machete in hand, goes to strike down at Negan. Then a flash. We see Negan on the banister at the sanctuary, with CRM helicopters invading, storming, and destroying everything of the sanctuary. And then he would be the last. Jason, he was a great looming savior. But these flashes that he has had, these hallucinations, these thoughts, and even just now, all of these just thoughts, it just proves Jason Voorhees is uncontrollable, and he was never going to listen to Negan. The Reapers, Jason was able to take care of them. The Whisperers, even easier. Beta was the strongest, but Jason proved too much. And he proved way too much for Negan to control. Every time that one of these instances he'd be thinking about, Jason is far too much. And then the CRM and the Commonwealth would team, and they would finally defeat Jason. And it all just flashes between Jason's life, Negan going through all of these instances with him, and then it flashes to Negan with the Whisperers, and him thinking about Jason in the same way that Negan's thought about him over and over and over again in the other instances. And he knows that Jason, he would kill him and all the Whisperers in an instant. And then it flashes to Negan's Whisperer mask that Negan's holding, showing present-day Negan at the end of The Walking Dead, showing that all of this, all of these thoughts, this entire time, had just been a hallucination process. And this connects with Negan's Alpha story, showing that both of the stories had connected to one linear point of Negan thinking at the end of true redemption, and it tying into the end of The Walking Dead. And he smiles, saying that he's glad that he made the right choice. And he's also glad he never met Jason. Because if any of those had happened, he wouldn't be standing here right now, about to look Maggie in the eye coming towards him and showing that Negan is truly a changed man. Whether it be a thought process of joining Alpha, or Jason Voorhees meeting one of the most iconic villains turned redeemed heroes of all time. And even in a hallucination or a dream or anything, nothing changes Negan's choice here today as he stares at Maggie coming towards him for one final talk. So, I know, I basically, in a way, copied what I've done with Dale's story, Negan's Alpha story, and kind of a few of the Marvel stories when you really think about it. But that's simply down to the fact that some stories are left as more or less just ideas within a character's own thought process, especially when you register something like the MCU, where all the timelines that I have done before, mostly all of them anyway, and ones that I will continue to do, especially when you account for the omniverse and time travel, universe, multiverse, whatever you want to call it. Let's just put it this way. The universe, as we know it, is one thing. Think about how we, as a universe, as a whole, there's a lot about the universe that we don't know, which is why we make stuff up all the freaking time. We don't know as much about the universe, the multiverse, or the omniverse as we'd like to think. So, honestly, this story was just a symbolization of what really could have happened and just the thought process of one's mind, even if it was a false story. But it's not like I'm the first one to do that. Yes, I have done it with the Negan Alpha and the Dale story. 40 freaking parts, by the way, still my biggest work. And many of other freaking stories before. Stewie Griffin has had a simulation freaking story and multiple episode run thing. And there have been lots and lots of interpretations that weren't actually real to one canon story. Especially when you factor in a lot of shows and movies. Many of them are dreams. Many of them are daydreams, nightmares, or just thoughts. This would basically just be a daydream plus thought. It's like the Negan Alpha story and the Dale story to a T, where it's basically like something that the character could visualize, maybe did visualize, and realistically could have happened to canonize said event, whether it's Dale surviving, Negan becoming the Alpha, Negan meeting Jason Voorhees and using him as a ultimate tool. But just because this wasn't real to an actual idea doesn't mean that the idea and concept, even if it was multiple flashes, could not have still happened. So by the beginning point, that was the first flash in which Negan would begin to conflict with the very idea and notion that meeting someone like Jason Voorhees would even be remotely possible. Even though it's a false show anyway, with walkers and variants and tigers and a lot of other things, but we're gonna ignore that. Anyway, yeah. Basically, the whole idea comes to a forefront of, yeah, it's one unrealistic thing coming into the idea of another unrealistic thing. So, yeah. Can't really argue, especially whenever it's a what-if story. But I do hope that even if it was, especially by the end, so crazy that it flashed multiple times, you guys ultimately get where I came from with the whole idea of Negan basically conflicting with the very idea of Jason Voorhees even being involved with him in the first place. Because, let's be honest, with how Negan would be after getting redeemed, he wasn't thinking as clearly or even having a notion of a different kind of era thought or even notion process. But there is one thing that makes the Negan Alpha and this story mean more than you could honestly think. And it makes the whole thought process of thinking about these two stories in his own head all the more logical. Just like Dale being the older one in his story and his head being logical. Even if it's later events. Difference, Negan's thinking of earlier events. Dale was thinking of events past his death. But you guys, I hope you still appreciate that. Side note, sorry Dale. Anyway, the whole idea is that when Negan told Maggie that if he did it all over again, he would have killed every one of them, that to me is the ultimate symbolization of like, hey, you can use Negan's ultimate thought process and what he is as a character to blend in other ideas that could have involved him being involved in a certain way in a different story. It's just that if the story's not directly involving him and it's about something else, especially what you've done in stories before, you can't always center it to that being the thought process, especially if events that you already had put in place didn't happen by the time you made specific stories. Like, what if Negan and Carl joined forces? What if Negan met Gareth? It's like, you know, you can't think about those things, especially whenever, like I said, it's a what if, so things can get hairy and complicated. But I think you guys get the main gist of the whole Jason Voorhees and Alpha ideas basically connect, not together, but also together. As a matter of fact, I also want to say that since Negan also had the thought process of being still with Alpha and meeting Jason Voorhees, which, by the way, is going to be another what if centering in Jason. He is going to be involved with the variants in France, and he's going to be involved with Alpha and the Whisperers. So, Negan having that thought process along with joining Alpha together, I can see him thinking about both of those things at the same time. So the Negan Alpha story and this story could have been thought about at the exact same time, and it would have made a cohesive whole and made sense, especially since I ended the story the same way. Not that I was meaning to do that in an entirely whole, but there's a reason why I did that. It's because if I were to kill Jason, who is basically immortal and cannot die, even though it's been shown that he can die before, but he has been able to be brought back to life, especially when you factor in the first 3 movies, if I had somehow miraculously someway killed Jason, it would have basically made the rest of the story pointless, and it would have focused on The Walking Dead rather than Jason Voorhees, and it would have been a bittersweet and kind of boring rest of the story. And Jason Voorhees is just... he's in a fine line where The Walking Dead is like, he's definitely more suited for things like John Wick or the MCU or Lord of the Rings. The Walking Dead is almost too weak for him, but he still balances great depending on who you put him with, which group you put him in, or where you put him in specifically. So, yeah, Freddy Krueger is never going to happen because there's no way to make that make sense, especially dreams and everything. And Michael Myers, it's just, I like Michael Myers, but I can't center him into a story and actually make sense. You know, it's just would be an analysis for him and Freddy, if anything. And I could just tell you right now, there's no point in putting into characters like that that really don't need or even have to be put into a story for The Walking Dead. So, honestly, I can see the Alpha and the Jason Voorhees ideas connecting together into one story. I'm not going to be combining the 2 movies into one thing, though. God, no, that would be confusing. But I can tell you from a what-if perspective, that could also be very well canonize and make more sense as to why it kept flashing, because it was originally, in my opinion, going to be an idea of Negan thinking about all this and then him just conflicting so much that he snaps back to reality right before Maggie goes to talk to him. But I could think that it would actually make more sense if he was thinking about being the new Alpha and Jason Voorhees at the exact same time, because then that would not only help canonize and really redeem him, maybe even more so than he already was, even though by frickin' season 11, Negan was redeemed. Like, come on now. Even if Dead City did some things to conflict that. But, yeah. I definitely think that no matter which way you add it up, this is the best way that you can honestly make Negan's Jason Voorhees and the Alpha stories make sense, because otherwise, it's just a either very dark... Let me just say this right now. It's a freaking dark ending. Think about it. Negan's the Alpha. I've already shown as to what would happen there. Yes, he would conflict so much by that point that he would hurt, but the Jason Voorhees one, oh god, no. World's done. Because it would be too much for him to control, and Jason Voorhees would just go on a murderous rampage. At that point, the world would be done. And honestly, I just don't see any other way besides making it, like, think about how I made the Dale story so freaking bloody dark and freaking brutal, and then made it a daydream at the end. Because, let's be honest, who would want to see a story with a sad ending, or a very dark ending, you know? If you think about it, I still did do those for all those 3 stories, including this one, but it's a dark ending within a thought process. So when you think about it, I did still do a dark ending. I'm just making it more logical as to what would actually happen, you know? Especially if the story is so boring or short, before that. The Dale one, that was more or less just a Stewie ripoff, you know? But for the both Negan stories, it was honestly just a way to center them both together by the time I'm recording this, and just mostly makes sense, you know? So, I do hope that you guys don't think that this is a repeat. I definitely did not want to make it a repeat, but like I said, I didn't really have another way to counteract it. Because if I did make Jason kill everybody and do all this, that, and the other thing, it would just be... it would show the ultimate meaning, but it would be the too obvious meaning, you know? That's why I did the Jason Walking Dead thing. That was the obvious meaning. This one, I wanted to change it up very much to make it worth the anticipated wait of actually putting Jason in a story for once on this channel, you know? And if I somehow made the characters win, then it would take away from the entire idea of Negan and Jason Voorhees, which is the centerpiece of the entire story. Either way, it would ruin it. It would be very, very boring. So, I do hope that you guys enjoyed this 3-part tale. I honestly thought that it was going to be longer, but hey, a story is a story. No matter which way you add it up, if the story calls for something specific, you can't change fate. And with that, I do hope that you guys enjoyed this story for what it's worth. And do not worry. Yes, I have done 3 stories like this. The MCU is different because of the time stone. But I know. I have done 3 Walking Dead stories on this channel as of this point that have been exactly at the end like this. But do not worry. Because, as the vast majority of the Walking Dead stories on this channel will tell you, that is far from my main source of usage for when it comes to a story. And I bet you guys know that there are plenty of videos that really state this claim thoroughly. But if you guys are not bothered by this and you feel that this ending was justified, let me know. Because honestly, I think that this is the best way to centerpiece this idea into a cohesive story. And with this, I promise you, these 3 will likely be the only 3 stories for a good long minute that you see end the way that this has. And with all that said, I truly hope that you guys enjoyed What If Negan Used Jason Voorhees, and I will see you guys in the Bardock Super Saiyan analysis story, because there's a lot to talk about there. But I'll see you guys then, and thank you guys for checking out this story.